Māori e karanga nei. Kei te whakarongo au Stephen, raua ko Alan, ki te reo o Papatuānuku, raua ko Ranginui, mea raua tamariki, nō reira, tēnā kōrua. Kei te whakarongo pikari ngā kai whakahaere o tēnei Wānanga. Ai, te Kotahi Research Institute, raua ko Taiao, ka nui te mihi ki a kōrua mō tā mahi i te ahi nei, i te ate nei hoki. E oku aropa me toku whānau hoki, Ara, Whaia Katarina, raua ko Matua Waurau. Ai, nau mai. Ka nui te mihi ki a koutou mō o koutou tāringa e ariare mai nei ki tēnei kōrero e pā ana ki tō tātou reo. Whakahaumanutia te reo Māori. Kei te whakarongo au, ko wai au. He uri no Ngāti Porou me te whānau apanui hoki, e mahi ana au ki Nicholson Consulting. Ko Ernestynne Walsh, tōku ingoa. Ko tēnei te marama o mahuru Māori. Nō reira, e rua, nā kauhau. Ko te tuatahi, reo Māori. Tuarua, reo Pākehā. Whakarongo mai. Tēnei au e whakarongo ana. E rua nā wāhanga o tēnei kauhau, ko te horopaki me ngā whakakitenga o te rangahau nei. He aha tēnei kaupapa i rangahau ai. I ki a Leon Blake, raua ko Pānia Papa, tutuinga te hatete o te reo. Kia kōngange, kia pūkauri, kei pūrehua, ka piroku, ka kewa. E rangahau ana mātou, me pēhea te reo, e pūkauri ai. Kia ora. Tuarua, ko tētahi o ngā whāinga matua o te kāwanatanga o Aotearoa, kia ko tahi miriona kai kōrero reo Māori a te tau 2040. I tonua te rangahau nei e te whare o te reo Māori ora. Ara, te taurawhiri i te reo Māori, te matāwai, me te tāhuhu o te mātauranga. Tuatoru, ko te tūmana ko kia reo Māori a tātou mokopuna. Ngā mokopuna. E ngā kāwai whakaheke. Tukua te reo ki te rangi. Kia haruru ki te ao katoa. Tika tērā, e pere. Raiti, ko ngā whakakitenga. Māwai te whakahaumanu te reo Māori. Mā tātou katoa te whakahaumanu te reo Māori. Kei hea ngā kai kōrero. Heka mā toko maha nā kai kōrero ki tai rāwhiti. Mā tātua hoki. Ka pai. E whiti ana ki ōtaki. Neke atu i te hawhe o ngā tangata Māori, e kōrero ana i te reo Māori. Ka tere ake te reo. Ka tere ake te reo ki te kōrero I te reo Māori. Ki te noho tētahi kai kōrero ki tō kāinga, ki tō whare, ne? Ai, kōrero. Ka tere ake te tīpuranga, nā tamariki, ka tere ake te tīpuranga o ngā kai kōrero, mēnā he maha ake nā tamariki Māori kei ngā kura Māori. Ka whakatūria ngā wāhi rūmaki, ngā kaupapa rūmaki mō ngā whānau. Me u tātou ki te reo Māori mō ake ake tonu e. Kia ora. So I want to also thank the organisers for letting me do 2 little koho during this session. I'll just give a brief overview just so that we're all on the same page together. So when I was providing the context for the first koho, I spoke about mihi karona and also mihi Māori. We talked about government aspirations such as 1 million speakers by 2040, and some of you might have picked up, I also drew inspiration from the Mahuru Māori waiata, and I used that to emphasise the mihi Māori side. At the same time, as us who whakapapa Māori, I think you can say there's that fire that burns inside us. We're really steadfast and we're wanting to revitalise our language and our traditional practices. So I was also able to draw inspiration from the waiata from Leon Blake and Pania Papa. So that is our why. Why are we doing this mahi? The mahi was commissioned by Te Mātāwai, Te Taurāwhiri I Te Reo Māori and the Ministry of Education. So we worked in a partnership with them, us, Nicholson Consulting and Kōtata Insights. I think the key discoveries from the rangahau, we could see it. We could see that Te Reo Māori revitalisation is not just about what's happening in our education system. It's about what's happening in the home, in the whare, with our whānau. We can also see it's about the takiwā and the communities. So, sort of places like Ōtaki, you can see why everyone wants to move to Ōtaki, ne? A lot of speakers there. So I think this mahi has been really exciting in showing many of those discoveries. You could see that out of the kaupapa we looked at, those community immersion classes are a big driver in terms of Te Reo Māori speakers, as is kura as well. So what I'm going to do at the second koho is go into a few more technical details, but don't worry, it's not going to be too technical. I'm going to talk about the benefits of Māori AI, and then talk about he aha ki tua, what's next on this haerenga. So in terms of the technical details, I'll keep it relatively high level. So this type of mahi, the technical term for it is called a micro-simulation. What we do here is we essentially create the population of Aotearoa. And we do that by looking at data that is available in the IDI. That's the Integrated Data Infrastructure. Essentially, it's a government research database. So any data about government administration, such as tamariki going through education. You'll find that data there. You'll also find the census, which is really important because that's got a question about being able to speak te reo Māori. And it also has a series of surveys such as Te Kupinga, which is one of the cultural surveys, and that also has some pātai regarding te reo Māori as well. We use the data in the IDI to create this synthetic population. It essentially looks like the people in Aotearoa, but it's not directly their data, it's simulated data. And oku whakaaro noe hoa, I feel that helps make the data more noa, the fact that we haven't directly taken the data out of the IDI. Stats NZ, who is essentially the caretaker of the IDI, also has particular rules and procedures regarding taking data outside the IDI. Taking a synthetic population out of the IDI had never been done before. There were 100 questions from Stats NZ. We answered them all. Another 100 questions comes back again. So we had the chief stats methodologist also have a look at the mahi as well. And after we answered all their pātai and we'd gone through all their safety checks, they said, ka pai, this is tika, this is pono, okay, we'll let you take the data out. So this has set a precedent for anyone else who wants to do this type of mahi going forward. A Māori kaupapa has paved the way for how we use data within the IDI and how we take it out and ensure that we are good kaitiaki. So what do we do with this synthetic population? Well, when you do a simulation, you look at events, things that happen during a person's haidinga. For instance, we might have a pepi that is born, and maybe the mother and the father can kōrero in te reo Māori. Well, that will certainly increase the pepi's chances of being able to kōrero too. Perhaps they are born in Ōtaki. That's definitely going to increase their chances again. Maybe they go to kura. So all these experiences during the haidinga can contribute to their ability to kōrero i te reo Māori. And that is what we are measuring. We look at the number of conversational speakers and the number of fluent speakers. Because of the mihi corona goal to 2040, we simulated the changes to te reo Māori speakers out to 2040. The results we got show what happens if you just stay the course. What happens if you essentially don't do anything extra. But for us, that's not good enough. We want to strive. We want to aspire to a situation where our mokopuna, they can speak the language. They don't need to go to community immersion classes like myself and Danny, my hoa mahi, to learn the language. So what we introduce is something called a lever. Essentially, this is a what-if question. What if we have more whānau in community classes? What is the impact of that? What if we have more of our tamariki going to kura? What is the impact of that? So you can essentially pull these levers and see what happens year on year out to 2040. This is done at a community level as well. So on that mahere, that map before, when we're like, oh, fu, Ōtaki, for each community, which is roughly 1,000 people, you can see what is going on in the community. And that sort of level of detail has never been seen before. A lot of the time, we get lumped as Māori, and there is no disaggregation. There is no looking at what's going on in the community. But if you lump everyone together, you miss those places like Ōtaki that are shining brightly. There is one other thing I want to mention in terms of the technical details. At the start, I said we use the IDI, and there's a lot of government data there. The government is really good at collecting taxes and distributing that putea, that money. They have a record of people going to school, people passing their courses, because that's where the money that they have collected goes to. What we did with this mahi is we worked very closely with Te Matawai before this Ara Poutama simulation started. We wanted to understand what are the aspirations of the communities and what data did the communities or Te Matawai have available to help tautoko this mahi. And what did they have? They had an evaluation of te tārangi, the community classes that most of you will be familiar with and that Danny and I have been going to as part of our haerenga. Government's not paying for those, so they're not got any records of what's happening with te tārangi. I'm sure a lot of you can also think of examples of community kaupapa where the community is driving something. They're self-funding it, often from koha. Government's not going to have a record of that. I think of things like Ngāti Porou ki Waikato, our waiata sessions run by Matua Waldo. The government is not going to have a record of that. And these are the places and spaces where we're really learning our language in a way that resonates with us. This is where we're thriving. So it's really important to look at what data do our communities have, not just what data does the government have about us or what data is publicly available. I challenge you all to have a look at the data that you've got available within your communities and think about what stories, what things could be done with that data to reach some of your community's aspirations. Okay, the benefits of Māori AI. I'll start first by talking about the benefits directly of the Ara Poutama mō te reo Māori mahi, but then I'll also look more generally based on the kōrero that we had yesterday. In terms of this simulation, it can answer a series of what-if questions. What if we have more whānau in te tārangi style classes? What happens if we have more tamariki going to kura? These sorts of questions can inform te reo Māori revitalisation plans, and some of our recent mahi with Te Matawai has been working closely with their board and preparing information for the pai motu hake, the community representatives who have the kōrero with Te Matawai. A lot of the kāhui, which is how the funding works for Te Matawai, they have their own te reo Māori revitalisation plans and their own aspirations. Each of them slightly different, but Ara Poutama can be used to help answer some of the questions and to help our communities on their haerenga. I was very keen to show you some of the mahi because there has been some exciting discoveries. Hoia noa, the mahi is still being presented to the pai motu hake. They were told they would get to see the mahi first. So I don't want to show it here and then have them go, bloody hell, you said you were going to show it to us. So, mō taku here, but perhaps a tōna wā, if you have a kōrero with your pai motu hake, you'll be able to see some of those discoveries too. The big thing I've noticed, and we presented this mahi a lot, is that communities get so excited when they see those maps. Those maps have not been seen before, and the data was sitting there. It just needed a kaupapa. It's almost kind of competitive as well. You see a bit of a whawhai going on where people are like, oh, look how many speakers there are in our community, eh? So it sort of provides that impetus to have some celebration stories as well. I often find that when there is mihi done in the IDI space, it's often framed from a more deficit lens. And I think that's another thing that we need to look at. How can we tell our stories in our way, a way that's uniquely Māori, a way that resonates with us, our people, our communities. And the number of people I've seen, I've been on a lot of Zooms, sometimes they're on mute, but you see someone going like this, you can see that they're really excited, they're pointing at the maps. We need those sorts of stories, those sorts of celebrations. So I think Ara Poutama has done a lot in that space to create some of those celebrations. The more Western, the more capitalist view, I'd call it, is the fact that using a tool like this can help with investment decisions. So microsimulations, these are tools that the likes of MSD and Treasury use when they do their budget bids, when they're doing a tono and asking for billions of dollars. We now have that superpower as well in the cultural space, in the te reo Māori space. And I think of our tipuna and his kōrero e tipu e rea ki tō ringa ki ngā rākau a te Pākehā. And that's what I'm thinking with these microsimulations. These are tools that the government responds to because it aligns with their thinking of the world. So by using these tools, we can help get more pūtea for our communities. I appreciate that the pai motuhake, when they make these decisions, they won't just be thinking about the pūtea. Whilst we can say, hey, if you invest here, this will give you the biggest impact in terms of the number of speakers, there are going to be a whole lot of other factors that they're going to consider as well. However, where it might help is situations where you want to tono and ask the government for additional funding for budget bids. You can use something like a microsimulation and say, hey, if we invest in this community, you're going to get a huge number of speakers. It'll help you with your mihi corona goals. That sort of whakaaro may help in terms of securing more pūtea. So those are the benefits that I can think of regarding Ara Poutama and microsimulations. But at the same time, I want to look further than that as well, because I believe that Māori AI is not just AI about a Māori kaupapa. Māori bring a unique way of seeing the world. We have the lived experiences of our tipuna. We have their mamai, we have our own mamai, and that can really change the way that you approach mahi. We know how to manaaki. We know how to be good kaitiaki. If these sorts of kaupapa were applied in the space of data and AI, imagine what could be achieved. We could carry out mahi that's more connected, that considers te tai ao, that considers taonga tuku iho, that's thinking about our future generations, our mokopuna, our mokopuna's mokopuna. So I encourage us all to think beyond just Māori AI as being AI about a Māori kaupapa, because there is a lot that we have to bring to the table. One thing that I think was quite interesting as well is the kōrero around growing capability. And I think I'll want to mihi again to Te Kotahi Research Institute for organising the Whāki webinar. These are practical sessions where you get to hear from people doing the doing, whether it be whangaunga Kevin, kei hea koe, oh, hey, got some awesome kōrero there. Daniel did some, kei hea, Daniel. Ka pai, standing and I miss you. Daniel's also done some awesome presentations. There's presentations about Pakahi Māori, there's presentations about hauora. It's really an amazing opportunity to learn a bit more about what others are doing in the space. All of these videos are publicly available through the Te Kotahi Research Institute, so I'd also encourage you guys to have a look, have a little tutu on their website. Where to next? I talked briefly about how we'd done some more mahi with Te Matawai, and that I couldn't show it because they were presenting it to the Pai Motuhake, and they haven't quite finished yet. But what I can say is that they have done a lot of mahi on the Maihi Māori side, particularly in immersion domains. These are spaces where it's rumaki. We can speak te reo i ngā wā katoa. These immersion domains are things like communities, like Ōtaki, where we've heard whakaaro like, oh, it's like you go there and every other person can speak te reo. And we're like, aye, that's what the data says as well. There's also whānau immersion domains as well. So looking at the impact of what happens when you have tamariki and there are people in the household who can kōrero Māori. Because we saw the biggest driver was having someone in the household who could speak the language. So they've been doing a lot of mahi around immersion domains. That was what they chose to focus on this time around. The other piece of mahi we've done is with Te Taurawhiri Te Reo Māori, an amazing wahine, an amazing Indigenous wahine that Danny and I work with, Kia Basabas, that some of you might know. She worked with Te Taurawhiri to set up a new governance framework for Ara Poutama mō Te Reo Māori going forward. And it is based on Māori values. There was an interesting kōrero yesterday about where should Māori be involved in the AI haerenga. And what we say is right from the beginning. With the Ara Poutama governance, if you can't answer how this benefits the communities and how the communities are going to be involved in your mahi, your project will not get off the ground. And a project has already been asked to go back to the drawing board and think about this before they proceed. So I think that's another good example of how Māori AI is just not AI about Māori kaupapa. Here is an example where we're bringing our whakaaro right from the beginning and it's resulting in a better outcome. In terms of he aha ki tua, I'd also put that question to you. What is next? You work within your communities, you're spending time with your whānau. I'm sure that all of you have pātai and ideas that will really help with our community aspirations. So my wero today for you is to think about what data the communities have, what data is outside of government, but also think about the aspirations that you know of your whānau, of the hapori, hapu, iwi, and think about how data can be used to help with those aspirations.